from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
One of our favorite programs to do is a travelogue, and we have had the opportunity to interview guests from all over the world and also people in America who have traveled to different countries. And from your calls and letters, you have indicated that you enjoy our discussion of those visits to those countries. We're going to do that today. Our travel today is to Scotland, and I hope some of you have had that opportunity to see that country. And our guest today will be able to, I'm sure, enlighten you and also excite you about a possible trip to that part of the world. Our guest is Judy Whatley, who is a businesswoman in the state of Idaho. She and her spouse own a business here in North Idaho. In addition to that, I would like to publicly thank Judy for almost 2 years ago now, along with another businesswoman, Katie Brody, for co-chairing a very important function for this program. We celebrate our 1,000th show. We had a wonderful evening, and Katie and Judy were the co-chairs and worked many hours for that to happen. And Judy, I publicly thank you for that special evening that we had after, at that time, 21 years on the air, and now we're in our 23rd year.
It was my pleasure, Tony. Thank you for allowing me to participate.
And thank you for being here to talk about Scotland. I know you were there recently, and I know you're very busy, but you're very generous with your time always. And I'm also pleased, as always, to welcome Janelle Burke, who is an attorney in the state of Idaho and a member of the regular panel. And I shall ask Janelle to commence the questioning.
Judy, you and I have been acquainted for some time now, and it's such a pleasure to welcome you to the show.
Thank you, Janelle.
It's going to be fun to talk today about an adventure that you had recently that's going to Scotland. And so can you tell us how you decided to go and something about the parameters of the trip?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you both for having me and allowing me to expound on my experience. It was such a wonderful experience that I love sharing it. And some people accuse me of working for the Scottish Tourist Bureau, but I don't. My friend and I were in England several years ago and loved England very much, wanted to see more of Great Britain, and decided that our next trip would be somewhere in Great Britain. Scotland seemed the logical place, and so we decided to travel, just the two of us, rather than go on a tour, because we wanted the freedom of seeing the places that we wanted to see and not having any schedule or itinerary. So we met in Washington, D.C. She came from Florida, and I from Idaho. Of course, a much longer trip for me. But we landed in Glasgow, and originally we had ScotRail passes, and our plan was that we would take the rail around the country, get off at whatever little town or area that we wanted to visit, maybe rent a car in that particular area. It didn't take us long to realize that as Americans we were so dependent on cars and the freedom that they give you that the ScotRail pass wasn't going to work for us. So after about 2 days we tossed those, rented a car, and said, we're not giving this up till we leave the country. Unfortunately, since we hadn't pre-planned, the only car available was a stick shift, so not only are we driving on the opposite side of the road, we're now changing gears with our left hand. But with both of us navigating and watching out for traffic and reminding each other that, okay, other side of the road or whatever, we were able to accomplish it. And we were amazed at how quickly we became accustomed to the left hand changing of the gears. So we didn't run into any Scottish people, and they didn't run into us, so.
It was a successful trip.
It was a very successful trip.
How long were you there?
We were there for 2 weeks.
And approximately how many miles did you cover?
Well, I'm not sure.
Or would you say it that way? You would maybe say destinations, perhaps.
Maybe destinations, because as an example of how we traveled, the Isle of Skye is only 50 miles long, and we put 250 miles on the car, on Skye. I'm not quite sure how we did that. But the destination was to go into Glasgow, of course, where we landed, and to go north and then come down the center of the country, go into the borders, and back up into Edinburgh and then to Glasgow to return. We felt like we wanted to get a complete flavor of all of the country.
Now, I would think that it would be an advantage to be English speaking, that is, to be able to speak the language of the country that you're visiting. What would you say about that?
Oh, absolutely. It's a great advantage. Even though the further north we get, the deeper the brogue got. And sometimes we were catching every third word. But at least we could catch every third word.
But you could communicate.
We
and
could communicate. And they speak, of course, their English is very close to ours, with the exception of the brogue. We met a lot of people from various countries, and they all speak English, which makes you feel a little inadequate because you're not speaking French or Greek or whatever their native language is. But yes, an English-speaking country is much easier to travel in.
Now, I understand, although I've not had the privilege of going to Scotland, that it's extremely beautiful.
Oh, it is. It is. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of North Idaho. And I can't say it's more beautiful, or I may not be able to live here, but it's very green. They have the mountains, a lot of rivers, a lot of streams. One of the things that amazed us about their rivers is, I mean, you would be in a town like Inverness that is just hundreds and hundreds of years old that would have a river running through it. And the river would be crystal clear. You could see the bottom of it. Everywhere you went in the country, all the rivers, the streams, were just so clear and pure. And it saddened me in some ways because in such a few short years we've managed to pollute so many of our rivers and streams, and maybe they did and have recovered and learned. And I hold out that hope for us. But the rivers are beautiful, and the country is beautiful. They get a lot of rain. One of the things we learned very early is that in Scotland it's going to rain, the wind is going to blow, and the sun is going to shine every day. So don't even look out of the window in the mornings. Just get up and go about whatever you plan to do.
Judy, you are so gifted at making us feel like that we're there with you. That's a gift of describing it. Also, writers oftentimes can do that. Tell us some things that you learned about the people of Scotland. And I have some bias here because being Scottish myself, and yet I've not been to Scotland. Tell us what kind of people they are, and some of their interests, not only what they do as an occupation, but how they spend their free time.
Tony, the people in Scotland are absolutely charming. They are the most polite and kind people I've ever encountered anywhere. And coming from the South, I think that's saying a lot for us. It took us about 4 hours in Scotland to realize that we were being the aggressive, ugly Americans just by being our natural selves, because they are so polite. And when we would go to queue up for some places, they would call getting in line. Of course, we would rush there because we were in a hurry and you have to get in line. And we would notice that all of the people are standing back. So we had to make a conscious effort to mind our manners, so to speak, and really look around and see what the other people were doing. Because they are so polite, they are going to let you go ahead. They're going to let you do whatever you want to do. And traveling all around the country and talking to the different people at the various places we stayed or the restaurants we ate in or wherever we visited, they were interested in you. They asked questions about you, your country, what you were doing. Were you enjoying yourself? That seemed to be a prime concern with them. Are you having a good holiday? Are you enjoying yourself? They're just a wonderful, charming people. And every time I call back there for something, I want to go back.
What are some of the hobbies they have in their free time?
They walk a lot. They walk an awful lot. In fact, if you're going to Scotland, one of the things you need to know is that when someone says it's a wee bit down the road, you better put on your hiking shoes. Because a wee bit down the road to us may be several blocks. To them, it's several miles. And I think the oldest Scottish grandmother can outwalk the youngest American. And we had to find out very quickly that their terms of length when it came to walking was not our terms. But they do the natural things. Walking, hiking is very big with them. Theater is very big. Education is so important. No matter where we went, like Glasgow would have 7 universities in the city. Every little town had some form of higher education. Education is extremely important to them. It's a high priority.
Also, one of the things we always ask our guests for our viewers that might be going in the future, what's the mainstay of their diet and the foods that they enjoy most?
Well, Scotland is the heart attack capital of the world, and we found out why very quickly. The food is wonderful, but it's very rich. A lot of creams and butters and all of the things that we've been told are bad for us but are so good. They eat a lot of seafood, of course, because they're surrounded by water. A lot of lamb, a lot of rich desserts, and they eat a lot of food. They don't have small meals. A typical breakfast would start off with some type of fish, 3 different types of meat, eggs, and then go on to maybe fruit or whatever cereal you wanted. All of this covered with cream and butter and the things that we aren't supposed to eat, but that were absolutely wonderful. The desserts are marvelous. One of my favorite was hot meringue pie, and we never heard of lemon meringue pie, but trust me, if you ever go to Scotland, try it. It's great.
I've been to Finland on more than one occasion, and it sounds like the diet is very similar. Pastries and all, and wonderful desserts, and lots of cream, and they also in Finland, in addition to the 3 rather large meals, there's usually a break in the afternoon where you have pastry again and
high tea.
High tea.
High tea is always important, and then when you go to a wonderful restaurant and you feel that you just absolutely can't eat another mouthful, they'll suggest that you go into the library where they have a roaring fire and have after-dinner coffee. And so now you're convinced that you will never eat again, and they come around with homemade chocolates. So as you go to bed, you know that you just won't be able to face another meal, and come breakfast, you're anxious to go down to breakfast and see what they have there. They have another custom that we really enjoyed, and that is when you go to a restaurant, rather than being seated in the restaurant and ordering drinks there or waiting for your dinner, they seat you either in a library or some charming little place that's very quaint. They bring your drinks to you there, you order while you're sitting there, and then you don't actually go into the restaurant until your food is ready to come to the table.
Well, that's lovely.
Yes, I got very used to that service.
Janelle Burke.
And I'm sure you stayed at some gorgeous places. So
did.
Tell us a little bit about what kind of place can Americans expect to stay if they're going to travel in Scotland?
You can stay at any type of place you want with any price range. Since we didn't have reservations at any of the places because we didn't have a schedule, we would try to get to the tourist bureau, and every little town, no matter how small, has a tourist bureau. And we would go in, and all you have to do is tell them what you're looking for. And it could be anything from a youth hostel to a 4-star hotel. You tell them the price range, what your priorities are, and they actually make the reservations for you and direct you. So you don't have to just go in blind to any place. There was only one day when we traveled too long and didn't get to go into one of the tourist bureaus. And so just went to some hotel, and they were not what we were looking for, but we told them what we were, and they very graciously directed us. They're very kind, caring people, and they help you out a lot.
So the accommodations were great. Lots of what we would call bed and breakfast, I take it, as well.
Well, they call them bed and breakfasts, but it's not what we have in mind as bed and breakfasts. We only stayed in one home that I would actually consider a bed and breakfast, where you feel that you're actually invading the family's part of the home. A lot of the people have taken old manor homes, just charming, wonderful manor homes, and they'll take one section of it and turn it into rooms that they let. and the rest of the family lives in the other part of it. So you have the privacy, but yet you have all the quaintness and charm and just the warmth of being not in some cold place. One of the other things that amazed us is that the restaurants and the hotels aren't the big chrome places with fluorescent lights like we're used to here. No matter where we went, the restaurants were small and a lot of wood and soft lighting and charming and elegant. It made for a wonderful vacation.
Before we go on the air, we were talking with you about the difference between countries, and of course in a huge country with modern travel and technology, life is very fast-paced, and it's really affected all the institutions and the structure of families and relatives and friends. But one thing that really has been preserved in Scotland that you were sharing with us would be the concept of the clans. Would you take us through some of those characteristics and how generation after generation that they stay within the clan, and something about the security that comes from that kind of lifestyle?
Well, that was very interesting to us because as we moved around the country and went from place to place, you would go into a different area where obviously that clan was predominant in that area. And people in Scotland tend to live and die where they're born. And so if they're a member of, say, the Stuart clan, then obviously they're born into that. They have a place within the clan. They have responsibilities that come from that. And everyone knows their place and what's expected of them. In some ways, I think that is very secure to them. In some ways, the young people especially seem to see it as a little stifling because they wanted more freedom. But the clan history is there. They're very proud of it. They've done a great job in preserving it. They've also done a wonderful job in reaching abroad to a lot of the Americans, especially, and maybe Canadians, who are Stewarts and McLeods and McRaes and whatever, and bringing them back into the fold by use of newsletters or big reunions, and to make people feel that they can go back to a part of their heritage that they don't have in this country.
If you do go to Scotland and you're of Scottish background like I am, you certainly can trace back to where the clans are located, and some of the castles, for 500, 600, or 700 years, the family has been there. In other words, it's possible to go visit where your roots are.
And we had that experience. I'm not Scottish, and neither was my friend Dana, so we didn't personally have that experience, but she's married to McRae. And so we went to the Ellendana Castle, which is the McRae Castle. And that has been there since the 1200s. And we had an interesting experience going through that I shared with you earlier, where I very proudly announced to the guide that I was with someone who had married into the McRae family, assuming, of course, that the guide would be McRae. It happened to be a Mackenzie. And she announced to me that the Mackenzies had owned the castle and gave it to the McRaes in the 1500s, and she didn't know why. And I could still sense some hostility in her that they did not have the castle now. But that has to be very interesting for someone such as yourself who does have that background and can go and see where generations back your family lived. And there are a lot of the castles, there are over 500 castles in Scotland, by the way. So if you want to go on a castle tour, you can really do that. But there are a lot of the castles where the head of the clan still lives there. And we went to one of those, Dunvegan, and the head of the MacLeod castle, the clan, actually still lives there. And that is his responsibility and main job, is to be the head of that clan.
And it had been handed down, I believe you said his mother had been head of the clan?
And I was very pleased to see that they did acknowledge that women could head up the clans. And she had been head of the clan for about 50 years before the title was passed on to him at her death.
One other question before we go out to Janelle, it has to do too with symbols and identification. The plaids they use and all that, they mean different things, do they not? They're different plaids for different occasions?
Yes, they do. And just about the time you think you have the plaid down in your mind, such as, okay, the Stuart plaid is this particular pattern, you realize that there are approximately 4 different patterns for each clan. You have the hunting plaid, of course, which has more green in it to blend in with the hunting. You have the dancing, which is a prelude to the war. You have the working. And then you have a marriage. So if you think that you're wearing a tie and that you're having the Stuart plaid or whatever, you have to know which of the plaids you're wearing.
You might wear the wrong one on the wrong occasion.
You might wear the wrong one on the wrong occasion. You might be announcing that you're going to war when all you wanted was to go to a party.
Or a wedding.
Or a wedding.
Janelle.
Holidays are something very special, as I understand, in
Yes.
Europe and in Scotland. And so can you tell us what you think we Americans can learn from that?
Oh, I think we can learn a lot. I think in some ways we've misplaced our priorities, and the work ethic has become such that you don't take a long holiday or vacation, that if you can take a long vacation, it proves you must not be worth much or something. Their attitude is completely different. Everyone that we talk to, no matter what their job or their profession or how much they made, had plans for a holiday that they graciously shared with us. And most of the holidays were abroad, and they were for several weeks. It wasn't just a week, it would be 3 weeks or 6 weeks. And you would take an individual that you knew did not make a large salary, and they would be talking about their planned holiday to the U.S., or they had just gotten back from New Zealand, or a holiday to France. Although the U.S. seems to be the primary destination for most of the Scottish people that we talk to.
One of the other things that you talked with us about before the show was the attitude of people in some of the northern parts toward their government in the South, and it seemed somewhat like a mirror of what people are saying in our country.
As a matter of fact, I felt like I could be in North Idaho at one of our political meetings, Tony, when we complain about Boise. We had an opportunity one day to spend some time with a young man from Glasgow who worked for the government in Glasgow. And he was talking about how distressed they were, about the fact that they send people to Parliament, of course in London, and they pay their taxes down there, and once they get down there, because they don't have the population that England has, that they really have no voice in government. And I was thinking, gee, have I heard this before? And we saw an awful lot of signs, signs in windows and also bumper stickers that talked about freedom for Scotland. And there seems to be a real movement for that they want their own autonomy, that some factions no longer want to be part of Great Britain. I don't know how strong that is.
But they're somewhat interested in being recognized at any rate.
Yes, they are. And they just feel, I think as we do sometimes, that you don't get the representation because you don't have the population.
And youthful people, were they pretty much the same as what we would find in our young people here?
Oh, gee, I hope not. I hope our young people are more upbeat. They seem to not be as proud of their country as I would hope our young people are. And of course, I was just so enthusiastic about the country and telling them how beautiful it was and how much I was enjoying it. And they seemed anxious to be able to get someplace else. There didn't seem to be the hope among the young people that we have among ours. And I don't know if it's because of high unemployment, which I know they do have, or because they feel that if they were born in a certain area, that they don't have the capabilities to just transcend that and go on to someplace else. But that was the only distressing part, is that the young people didn't seem to have the hope. And maybe I didn't talk to the right young people.
One thing we do on this program, we have a travelogue too, is give our guests, after having a trip like this, to reflect and give advice to those who are not yet traveling. And I know we have viewers who are well-traveled, but others that are thinking about it. What's some advice you would give? You indicate at the beginning of the program that you went on your own, and it was a very independent tour. Others go in a tour group, and others take courses for credit and go with a class and so forth. And so I know the arrangements would vary depending on that. But if someone is planning a trip in the next year, what kind of advice would you give to a country like Scotland, but it could be other places too? What do they need to do before they leave to make the trip more pleasant?
Well, I think one of the first things they need to do is to do some studying, learn about the history of the country. And if it's not an English-speaking country, at least learn some of the language. I think that's very helpful. But all of those things aside, one of the most practical, important things you can do when you're traveling is to take everything that you think you absolutely have to have, throw half of it out, and just take that. We took with us one suitcase, the type that fits in the airline above the seat, and a cosmetic bag that fit on that with wheels. And that represents independence, because you are doing a lot of getting on and off the rails, doing a lot of walking, no matter, even if you have a car. And to be able to carry your luggage or just to wheel it behind you is wonderful. You never need as much as you think you're going to.
So many people take too much, and on the trips that I've taken with classes and students, some of them really struggle with too much luggage. And in Europe, you don't have as much assistance as you do in this country about helping you with your luggage and
That's
so
right.
forth. Again, we don't have a whole lot of time left, but along that line too, you mentioned earlier in the program that one of the things they liked very much was the theater. Did you have an opportunity to experience some of the drama productions?
I really didn't. Most of the theater is due in the summer and in September, and when we got there in late September, a lot of the theaters were either no longer going or they were in the larger cities. And so I would encourage anyone who was traveling to make advance reservations for those type of things.
And I suppose while you were there, you did get to see the performing of the bagpipes.
Oh yes, as a matter of fact, another charming custom they have when you're staying at some of these places is while you're having before dinner drinks in the very charming library, is to have the bagpiper play outside. And of course, it depends on what clan area you're in as to what tunes he's playing, and also the different types of plaids that he's wearing. But yes, the bagpipes were wonderful.
On that note, I have to end the program. I have a cue that we're out of time, and on behalf of Janelle Burke and our staff, Judy Whatley, thank you for being with us, and we all will have to visit Scotland after hearing from you.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been Judy Whatley, and she's been talking about her trip recently to Scotland and what that country is like, and I know you have found this program exciting and informative, and if you travel, I hope this has been helpful to you. I would like to invite you to be with us again next week, and we'll discuss yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.